All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabriel, and I'm from Anaheim, California, in the USA. This is my third year teaching at Wonchang English Village. On behalf of all my fellow colleagues, I'd like to welcome our new teachers to the English Village program and ask them to briefly give us a self-introduction so we have a better idea of who you are. And I promise this is the only time I'll put you on the spot. Now, to be honest, I was expecting a lot more new teachers, and it seems like we don't have a lot of them. Last year's orientations, we had quite a few. So if I could just get the new teachers, or relatively new teachers, if you've been here, let's just call it 6 months or less, could you please, with the scenarios with the English Village, could you please raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. So if you guys don't mind just telling us your name again and whatever, something interesting about you. We'll start over here. Well, no, actually, I'll start over there. Yeah, with Peggy.
Do I have to stand up?
No, it's cool. You got it. Yeah, whatever.
Hi everyone. I'm here at the Happy English Village with Stain, Ari, Edwin at the moment. I started end of last year program with Daisy, working with Daisy as well. I was born in Taiwan, so I'm Taiwanese, but I grew up in Sydney, Australia.
Thanks, nice to meet you, Peggy. I think there was a hand over here. 2 hands over here.
Hi, my name is Luke. Come from Port Elizabeth, South Africa. I went to Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Taught in New Taipei City for 2 years at a bushy barn called Hess, and moved to Zhongli on Sunday. And I'll be teaching at Zhongli Elementary School.
Hi, thanks, Luke. Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name's Ari. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, USA, and I spent a year in Tainan, and then just decided I'd rather live closer to northern Taiwan. So,
Hi, thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.
Hiya, I'm Martin. I've been teaching in Korea, but I decided it's a bit warmer here, so I've moved about 150 miles down south. And this is my group here, they're all right. There's no English people there, they're all American. And yeah, it's going okay so far, so hi to everybody.
Thanks, Martin.
You've got to put up with us bloody Yanks for a while, don't you?
Good afternoon, my name is Frederick McDougall. I'm from the United States, the state of Minnesota, up near the Great Lakes. I have been with the Wonchang English Village program since October, and went home for the month of January, did a little substitute teaching in my home district, and made a little bit of money, which was kind of nice, and came back. I'm very excited. I really love being in Taiwan. I have a background in music. That's certified K-12 music, instrumental music. My specialty is violin. Spent a little bit of time in Antarctica. It's kind of something interesting about, deployed to Antarctica 10 different times, worked at South Pole construction. Returned later to get my music degree after 2 years right out of high school. Took a major break and then returned to teaching. It seemed like the way to go for me, and really enjoyed it. Got my degree out of the College of St. Scholastica into Minnesota Small Liberal Arts College. Really digging being here and teaching in Taiwan. So that's it.
All right, thanks a lot, Frederick. Thank you, teachers. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Welcome to the English Village. A few weeks ago, I was asked by our recruiting agency to come up here and share my scenario teaching experiences with you, along with a detailed account of my very first day teaching at the English Village. Or first few couple of days, actually. To be honest, I don't remember much from the first day, and I'm still not sure why I was selected to speak, given that there are teachers here with much more experience and pedagogical knowledge than me. Nevertheless, I'm happy to share some of my observations, and I'll be even happier if this is somewhat helpful to all the new teachers. To all the current teachers, please feel free to jump in at any time and share whatever you like, or maybe just relax and think about whatever payday. That's what I'm thinking about, which is exactly 27 days, 19 hours, 33 minutes away from now. I don't think you can leave the room, but maybe in your mind you can leave, just like Maureen said. So anyways, I'm sorry to all the current teachers because you've heard this before. I planned this out mostly for the new teachers. So Anyways, before I begin, I'd like to clarify that I'm quite an inexperienced public speaker and not as eloquent as I'd like to be. Therefore, I hope you don't mind if I rely heavily on my notes. In fact, I'll probably just read the entire time. Also, it's important to mention that this presentation is by no means an inclusive formula to teaching scenario lessons. It is rather a very short collection of experiences and observations from current and former teachers, plus a little of what has worked and hasn't worked for me. Additionally, through our short survey, I've collected an array of opinions and observations from the more experienced colleagues, which I will be gladly sharing with you later on. I sincerely hope that through our experiences, you will gain valuable insight into what it's like teaching scenarios to Taiwanese children. I'm certain that with your previous teaching knowledge, your willingness to learn and understand Taiwanese culture and the educational system, complemented with your abilities, experiences, and guidance from your peers, you will undoubtedly have a great teaching experience at the English Village. Lastly, I promise to make this as short and sweet as I can. I was given 45 minutes, it's probably going to take 20, so I'll do my best. Alright, so. My first day teaching felt like any first day at a new job. I was very nervous, uncertain, and anxious. Despite having meticulously worked on my lesson plans and rehearsed repeatedly in the scenario room, in front of a mirror at my apartment, and in my landlord's living room with his family and their dog as my simulated students, I felt very unprepared and tense. I selected customs and immigration for my first scenario and was told that I would have to deliver my first teaching demo to my peers, coordinators, and the English Village director right after the lunch break. I made sure that I had all my flashcards, role-play cards, and props in place. I wore my best shirt and tie, and when it was time to start, I politely greeted everyone as they came into the room. I then proceeded to start. Before I knew it, I was done. I was all done. I must have been quite nervous because after about 15 minutes had passed, I couldn't remember a single word of what I said. What I do remember is that I went far beyond the 5 to 6 minutes I was asked to do. That won't happen today, I promise. I timed it. Probably out of nervousness and the fact that I ramble when I need to stretch out a presentation to cover my inexperience. As you might expect, the demo was met with mixed reactions, mostly poor ones. I was told that I was too slow and repetitive, long-winded. The vocabulary list was too long. The role-play dialogues were too difficult. I didn't use enough props. I forgot to cover some of the most important stations in the room, such as the check-in counter and the immigrations check. My flashcards were uncreative and hard to read. I didn't prepare a review activity, like a song or a game. I forgot to greet the imaginary students at the beginning and end of the demo. And most embarrassingly, I was told that in all likelihood, the imaginary students at the beginning, the students would have found my proposed lesson boring and minimally educational. Needless to say, I was pretty devastated. Now, I'm not trying to scare anybody here, I promise. And it's important to note that back then, our director was very strict and brutally honest. So as soon as she left the room, I was assured by my peers that I wasn't so bad. And I took comfort in their anecdotes of how they had also failed tremendously their first day. I spent the entire afternoon making the necessary adjustments and fine-tuning my lesson. A former colleague, who was also the head teacher at the time, and winner of 8 straight MVP awards given each month to the most effective scenario teacher, told me that a simple and generally accepted method of teaching a scenario to keep students engaged was through humor and performance skills. And that I should try to deliver my lessons according to the performing arts hierarchy. Sometimes with seriousness, like a theater actor, with rhythm and joy, like a musical actor, with jokes and humorous body language, like a stand-up comedian, with creativity and awe-inspiring games and tricks, like a magician, and sometimes even, and I quote, the characters and people in costumes at Disneyland that wave at people all day. Interestingly enough, I would later find out that keeping students interested often required a combination of all 6 of these methods. Making sure that at the core of it all was an effective and engaging English teacher. I would also learn that the success of my lesson would highly depend on the student levels, class sizes, the student's learning disposition, the time of day, maturity level, how hungry or sleep deprived the students were, and among other factors. To address my shortcomings and the repetitious nature of this job, I decided to take the tour guide approach and look into what helps tour guides perform their job of teaching and entertaining. I wondered how they're able to present the same routine over and over with as much enthusiasm and accuracy as the previous day. I simplified my dialogues to more basic, easy-to-read sentences. I used the school's prescribed vocabulary list consisting of 5 words. I brought a nice song, the chorus of I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly. If you're not familiar with it, it sort of goes like this. I believe I can fly. I believe I can... No one knows it. Yeah, I was hoping for someone to help me out. Yeah. No one ever sings it. A simple review, a game using Uno cards with colorful images and words printed on them for a review. And I timed each station in the room, making sure I had some sort of silly gimmick at each to keep the students entertained. Remembering to always teach the core vocabulary and expressions on top of everything else. I even convinced myself into believing that waiting in line at customs can be really fun. Because if you're convinced that your room is fun and authentic, you will more likely project that image onto your students, especially like if you're in the back, which is not very popular. I raised my voice so that I was heard around the entire room, trying to perfect the inflection, and going from cold and stern, like a customs officer, to perky and warm, like a ticket agent, while being able to correct the enunciation, accuracy, and flow of my students' responses. I also made sure the students always had something to do, so that while some were going through each station, the ones that were waiting were always occupied. I was firm in terms of discipline when needed, while staying true to my role of the check-in counter agent, metal detector personnel, and customs officer. Most importantly, I tried to make sure that the students were learning at least new words while having fun and emulating the experience of an authentic visit to customs. When the second day came, I was ready to ace my first class with actual students, or so I thought. Early that morning, due to unforeseen circumstances, we were told by the administration about an hour before the first class that there would be no students that day. Instead, a group of about 20 Russian dignitaries and representatives from the Ministry of Education in Vladivostok would visit our school to observe and possibly start an English village of their own back home. As you will find out while teaching at the English village, it is important to be flexible and have an open mind about last-minute changes, as they present themselves occasionally. When we saw the bus with the visitors drive up to the school gate, there was a moment of panic at first, but it was alleviated by the fact that I knew these were adults who would pose absolutely no problems, especially discipline-wise, and that everything would flow perfectly.
Was Vladimir Putin one of them?
Yes, it was a bunch of lookalikes. Yeah, I can't remember. Anyways, I imagined that everything would flow perfectly as they were there simply to observe and learn. Once again, I was wrong. When it was time to start scenarios, I greeted them at the door with a handshake, big smile, and a quick overview of class rules and expectations. I asked everyone to sing the song, but all I got was blank stage. In the class, I did my best and most animated impression of all 3 staff members in customs, making sure that I clearly pronounced and explained words, expressions, and that there was guided repetition and participation from the visiting students. Once again, blank stares and complete silence. Given the large number of people in the room, I was running out of time, so I decided to skip to the final stage of the scenario. I asked each person a simple customs-related question, which we had rehearsed a few minutes prior, so that I could stamp their passports. And I made my best impersonation of a customs agent. Out of the 20 people in the group, only one man, the person in charge, was able to give me a comprehensible answer. The question I asked was, "What brings you to the US?" To which the response was, "Hollywood. See Bruce Willis. Die hard. Yippee-ki-yay, you know." The crowd burst out laughing, having clearly understood the last part only, yet not understanding a single word from the rest of my class. Fortunately, before showing signs of frustration, someone explained to me that they were recording all the classes to be reviewed by English-speaking teachers back home. So the purpose wasn't really to learn the scenarios, but just to get an idea of what they looked like. This was only clarified until the day was over. The delegation thanked all the teachers and staff at our schools for a nice day, and they were on their way to continue their research at Taoyuan Night Market. In spite of everything, it was good practice for the following day, the real first day. Finally, on the third day, we had 5th graders from a public school in Taoyuan, just like we had been promised. When the day was over, just like on my first day, I forgot to use several props. I didn't mention some of the words. The dialogues were still too difficult, even after I had simplified them. I forgot to explain important terms, illustrate examples, and to guide the students and encourage more participation. I was just as nervous as the first week, and I must admit that I remained pretty nervous with each class for the following weeks. It wasn't until the 3rd or 4th week that I felt more confident, and that the room felt like it was actually entertaining, educational, and realistic. Despite not having a formal method of assessment or curriculum, I actually felt like the students were walking out the door, having learned something in a fun way. Unfortunately, by then, it was time to change to a different room, as mandated by the director, thus starting from scratch once again. After a few years, I've learned that, like any other discipline, scenario teaching takes a lot of preparation, practice, and especially patience. It has helped me tremendously to keep in mind that the lesson you teach the first day in any scenario will likely be different on the second day, almost completely different on the third day, and it will feel just right by the last couple of days, at the last week. In fact, it's been my experience that there are no two identical lessons. Little adjustments here and there, trying out new activities constantly, games, songs, arts and crafts, tweaking your flashcards, method of delivery, performance, and anything related to the room that you think will enhance the experience will go a long way. One particularly successful adjustment, just to name an example, was my bit at the customs desk at the last station in the room. My first week there, I simply sat behind the counter asking students to come up one by one to be asked a few questions in which they would have to reproduce the vocabulary and, depending on their success, receive a predetermined number of stamps on their passport. It was boring, they didn't like it, I didn't like it, it didn't really work. After a few weeks of making small, gradual changes, I decided to actually become the agent by wearing this hat, those gloves, this jacket, my imitation Ray-Bans, by changing the inflection of my voice to appear more imposing and strict, much like a customs agent. I simplified the words and expressions further, making sure that I made adjustments to each student according to their level, and I demanded that all students stand quietly behind the line while waiting for their turn, much like you would experience at a real American airport. Most importantly, I brought this old camera and I mounted it on the tripod. I made a fake fingerprint reader and asked the students to scan their fingerprints and smile for the camera. after seeing the flash and being temporarily blinded, they would get to see their pictures. And I'll just give you guys a quick demo with Fred, if you don't mind. So basically, the idea was to try to look the part. Try to wear this. You just sit there. My Ray-Bans. My gloves. Full cavity search.
That's so cool.
Okay. So then I would just ask the student a question, you know, why are you in the US?
On business.
Okay, so they would have, obviously we would have rehearsed the sentences prior to this. Said, okay sir, a few more questions. By the time they were done, I'd give them their stamps, just like I mentioned before. Okay sir, I need you to put your fingerprints right there, okay? And smile for the camera. I'm not going to use the flash because I don't want to blind Frederick. Okay, here's your picture. Thank you very much, sir. And so on, thank you. Next student. Right, so is it the perfect way of teaching that particular area in the scenario? No. Obviously there's better ways, there's more creative ways. Sometimes it works for some students, sometimes it doesn't. Some students think it's too infantile, some students go, crazy. But the point is, to try different things to keep the students engaged, because as you've already probably found out, they're pretty low level. So you can't really reach them in terms of language, you have to reach them in other ways. So this just, again, it's not incredible, but it works for me, is what I'm trying to get at. Okay. From that day on, I continually made adjustments, sometimes to accommodate for larger or smaller groups, different student needs, backgrounds, and discipline levels. This performance and humor method is something that has worked for me. The point is always to find ways to pique the students' interest so that they will participate and want to learn more. Some may consider this method cheesy, gimmicky, and feel that it can result in a deviation from the academic requirements. In fact, even I find it troublesome sometimes because it requires a lot of physical energy. And as a person who suffers from arrhythmia, I have to be extra careful. I can't get too excited. Other teachers prefer to take a more disciplinarian approach, whereas others follow a more comprehensive method in which the goal is to make sure the students are simply exposed to each part of the room and allowed simply to explore and play with minimal teacher guidance. Whichever way you decide to teach your class, remember that when it starts to get repetitive and difficult, it always helps to add a little creativity and patience. Lastly, remember to present your class with as much passion as you can. At last year's New Teacher Orientation at Dongli, Daryl, the former head teacher here at Happy, said, it's okay to feel tired and frustrated at times, especially when each lesson feels like the 100th time you taught the same thing over and over. But remember that for the children, it's always their first time, and it's their only chance they'll get to see you, and they always have high expectations. This is something that I keep in mind before each lesson, and it helps, especially when it's hot outside or the last lesson of the day when you're really tired. Not yet. I'm sure that your first day teaching in all likelihood won't involve Russians or R. Kelly, but if you find yourself struggling a bit, remember that it gets better each day, as long as you continually make the necessary changes. Halfway done. While every school, group, and lesson is unique in its own way, there are some general trends that you can consider to adjust your lessons accordingly. Namely, student attitudes, abilities, and educational and sometimes financial backgrounds and support. I'd like to share just a few observations in this respect so that you have a better idea of what to expect. Prior to teaching at the English Village, I had been teaching English for 6 years to mostly junior high school students in South America and East Asia, inner city high school students in Los Angeles, and refugees from war-torn countries under former President Obama's refugee resettlement program. I've also been a volunteer with churches and at retirement homes since I was in high school, and I'm still a volunteer here in Taoyuan twice a week at the Bada Nursing and Retirement Home. Some of our duties include feeding the patients, helping them take a bath, and simply keeping them engaged in mentally, physically, and spiritually constructive activities. Also, while in Korea, I worked in a private school with students from some of the most affluent families in Busan, South Korea's second largest city. In LA, most of my students struggled with domestic violence issues or were involved in gangs and drugs. While this may seem completely unrelated, in a way, the variety of students I've had in the scenarios are much like the students and patients I've had in the past. There's advanced and beginners, there's rich and poor, there's well-behaved and unruly, there's focused and those with learning disabilities, there's tidy students and very unkempt students, there's kids that are excited, there's lots of unwilling students, there's active kids, and then there's really quiet kids, and everything in between. I consider myself fortunate for having much of the experience that has made teaching at the English Village a bit more familiar. Yet I think I still learn something new about students, the educational system here, and whatever I can do to improve my class on a daily basis. Even with the experience helping disabled senior citizens at the nursing home, rich and very spoiled children in Korea, and at-risk teens in the US, I was still not prepared to know what types of adjustments I would make to our students' needs and abilities here at the village. There are students that had gone through real customs so many times before because they've traveled, they're well-traveled, and students who could barely write their own name. We have students with Asperger's, ADHD, and speech listening impediments. And it's really just challenging to adjust to groups that are gifted English speakers as well as absolute beginners in the same group. But it happens really, really often, as you'll find out. I was fortunate that in many ways teaching scenarios was similar to my previous teaching experiences, especially when it comes to teaching students with low levels, behavioral problems, and a general lack of interest in English. Just like my refugee students and students from financially challenged backgrounds, however, I found out that the vast majority of students in Taiwan show a great deal of interest in class, sometimes, and gratitude for the opportunity. Teachers are held in very high regard here and are greatly respected, again, most of the time. The challenges of scenario teaching are numerous and always changing, but the experience that you gain from it and knowing that you have planted the seed of interest in English in some of the kids is truly the best reward. Okay. Alright, so almost done. I suspect that some new teachers may feel nervous, anxious, and tense as I did, and sometimes still do, as your first day of scenario teaching approaches. In my case, the feeling of unfamiliarity was compounded by the fact that I had never taught elementary school students, and that my teacher certification program focused mostly on secondary level students. Needless to say, my knowledge regarding childhood education was very limited. Despite all the great advice I received from colleagues and the abundance of lesson plans, materials, and ideas available in our office and online, I was still pretty clueless as to how I would conduct a lesson in my very first scenario room. I think that to maximize the potential in each room, it's very important that you continually ask yourself practical questions about the use of your time, space, resources, and lesson content, such as, how will I use all that space? What exactly do I do with all the props? How will the students go from station to station, making sure they've all had the chance to experience the room fully, while actually learning the required words and expressions? How can I improve participation and assess learning in such a limited amount of time? How do I adjust to the naughty ones, the super quiet ones, groups with both super advanced learners and complete beginners? And most importantly, how do I keep the students engaged, having fun, all while maintaining an authentic scenario experience? These are questions that you will surely answer on your own with each passing lesson, but for the time being, allow me to share some of the answers provided by former and current experienced teachers. These are the questions that make up most of the survey I sent out to our teachers last week. Hopefully this will help clarify some of the most pressing questions or concerns you may have regarding scenario teaching. The first one being, what is your favorite scenario and why? Really, this is just so if you're still undecided in regards to, to which scenario you want to go to first, this might help you. The airplane cabin, pretty popular, hotel, shopping. Reasons are there's space, different kinds of props. Fun factor, this refers to a certain station in the room that is really popular with the kids. Example, our airplane cabin has a slide, and the kids love going down that slide right after you leave the airplane cabin to make an emergency landing. Our jail and police station has an actual jail, and the kids just love being in that jail. So that's what the fun factor is. You think it's the opposite, but they don't want to leave that jail. And it's time to go home, but they want to stay in that jail.
Hey, there's one right over here.
You guys have one here too?
There's a juvenile detention center right over there.
Like an actual one? So if
There's a juvie hall right behind you.
So if the kids get out of hand, you can just tell them.
Chuck them over the wall.
Colors, transitions, it's easy to go from station to station. They're quiet because I don't know if you experienced this at your schools. There's a lot of outside noise usually. Near the office was one of the reasons, and other reasons. I'm just going to quickly go over these. What made you want to teach at the English Village as opposed to the traditional classroom teaching? These are some of the opinions. The fact that it's authentic, realistic, the kids get the experience before they go to the actual real place. You meet new students and so on. So this is one of the good reasons, one of the good points of teaching here, I suppose. Question number 3, most challenging aspects of teaching at the English Village. Not being able to follow up on a student's progress or develop significant relationships. The variety of students and class sizes, they're always changing. Sometimes they love your activities, sometimes they find them very boring. What adjustments do you make